Now, we're talking about a sex scandal in this passage. And before we read our 9 verses in chapter 25, I want to give you kind of the backstory. Okay, so here's the backstory, because you got to read back about 3 chapters, and there's just too many chapters there. But the people of Israel have been led out of Egypt. They've crossed the Red Sea. Remember, they got to Kadesh Barnea in a year, and they were going to enter the promised land. But because of fear, because of the sin of fear, they didn't enter in. They died in the wilderness. Now God raises up a new generation. God led them around the land of Edom. Remember, last week we talked about that. Now they're camped at the north side, the very top of the Dead Sea. Those of you who've been to Israel with me, I pointed it out. It's the place where John the Baptist baptized people. It's the place where Jesus was baptized. It's the place where Joshua is going to lead the people of Israel to cross the Jordan River and come into the land of promise. They're camped right there. It's called Shittim. And they're camped right there. And the nation that's around them is Moab, the Moabites. Now, if you remember reading your Bible, there's this guy named Abraham, and God calls him from Ur of the Chaldees to go to a land that he was going to show him, the promised land. And he takes his nephew Lot with him. Do you remember that? And he comes into the promised land. Lot's with him. God blesses him so much, he separates Lot, because he wasn't supposed to have Lot with him anyways. He separates Lot because of his blessing. And Lot moves into what city? Sodom and Gomorrah. And so he's in Sodom and Gomorrah. You remember that's a wicked city that is detestable to God. God ends up judging that city, but he rescues Lot. Do you remember that story? And then it says he goes to the mountains, and Lot does something foolish. He gets drunk. And drunk people don't know what they're doing. And as a result, he's got 2 wicked daughters, and they end up having intercourse with their dad. Both of them end up being pregnant. One of the daughters is the mother of the Moabites. My point is that the Moabites are distant relatives of Israel. You with me? They're cousins. And so the Moabites, seeing how God has blessed the Jews, resent them. They're filled with envy towards them. So they hired this guy. His name is Balaam. Now, Balaam is going to be mentioned. As you read through the Old Testament and the New Testament, he's going to be mentioned over 20 times in the Bible. Book of Revelation, chapter 2, verse 14, talks about the way of Balaam and how he put a stumbling block. He got money and put a stumbling block in front of Israel so that they would serve idols and they would be immoral. You're going to see him in Peter. You're going to see him in the book of Jude. You're going to see him in various places in the Old Testament. And so this Balaam guy is a prophet, and Balak, the king of Moab, hires him and says, I want you to come curse these guys. Now, God keeps him from doing that. Do you remember Balaam's talking donkey, Mr. Ed? Do you remember that? It's not Mr. Ed the talking horse. It's Mr. Ed the talking donkey. Anyways, and long story short, the king of Moab takes him, lets him look over on the mountain, look over all the Jewish people, and he's going to pronounce this curse. He's getting paid to curse them. But God keeps him 3 times from that. And so the king says to him, God is keeping you from wealth. God's keeping you from blessing. You know, that's one of the great lies of Satan. God's keeping you from having fun. God's keeping you. And so he says, you know what? You give me the money, and I'll tell you a secret on how to destroy them. So he gives him the money, and he tells him, you worship Baal of Peor, one of the Canaanite gods, and it's detestable to God. And you do it with sexual perversion, and you have these prostitutes and these orgies and so forth. You throw a party and invite all of them to come and join you. And if you do that, they will follow in the temptation, and God will judge them. So they pay him his money. The stumbling block is set. And now we pick up in Numbers 25, starting in verse 1. It says, while Israel remained at Shittim, so they're camped at the north end of the Dead Sea, the people began to play the harlot with the daughters of Moab. For they invited the people to sacrifice to their gods. Invited what people? The Jewish people. They invited them to make sacrifice to their gods, and the people ate big party, bowed down to their gods. So Israel joined themselves to Baal of Peor, and the Lord was angry against Israel. The Lord said to Moses, take all the leaders of the people and execute them in broad daylight before the Lord, so that the fierce anger of the Lord may be turned away from Israel. So Moses said to the judges of Israel, each of you slay his men who have joined themselves to Baal of Peor. Then behold, one of the sons of Israel came and brought to his relatives a Midianite woman. In the sight of Moses, underline that in your Bible, in the sight of Moses and in the sight of the congregation of the sons of Israel. Right in broad daylight, he brings one of these girls right through his relatives, right in front of Moses, right in front of Israel, right in front of the tabernacle of meeting. They're weeping outside the door of the tabernacle. Remember the tabernacle where they were supposed to meet God? They're all outside. He drags this girl right through here, brings her into the tent. When Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron, the priest, saw it, he rose in the midst of the congregation and took a spear in his hand and went after the man of Israel into the tent and pierced both of them through, the man of Israel and the woman, through the body. So the plague on the sons of Israel was checked. Those who died of the plague were 24,000.